All right, nerds. Hello, nerds. Nerds for Humanity. I have a special guest today. I have Ryan J, who has been on the show before. Like, I feel like it was a couple of years ago. And we're going to have a Gen X and Gen Z take on the 2024 presidential race. It's certainly an interesting time. And I'm kind of curious to learn, like, is my perspective on this race very different than yours, Ryan, since we come from literally different generations? What is your current sense of this presidential race?
Well, first of all, thanks so much for having me on. I'm looking forward to this. And we last time it was fun, so I'm hoping this time it'll be as much fun. Um, I think the first thing that I think about this race is that Biden, I think, is still going to be the nominee, and I'm sure we're going to talk about that extensively throughout this show. But I think I think Biden is a pretty clear underdog, and I'm not sure that there's anything he can do if you're made as the nominee to dig out of that hole. That's my you know overwhelming feeling that Biden, no matter what happens, unless something crazy happens between now and November, he'll be the underdog come November 8th. Come November 5th. Now, I think Democrats are in a position where they have the chance to change, and I think that if they do change, that person will be Kamala Harris. I think that would make the race closer, but I think right now Donald Trump is probably favored to be the next president, for better or for worse.
And why are you so sure that Biden will remain on the top of the ticket by November?
So I think Biden is really not, I think stubborn is the wrong word because I think that kind of has like a negative connotation, but I think that he sees himself as an underdog, right? Like, you know, Biden, he's been counted out time and time again, or at least that's what he thinks. And in
Mm-hmm.
2020, if you remember, there was a point where he looked like he wasn't going to win the primary.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
he came back and he won the primary.
Yeah.
And then, you look at the 2020 election, he was always favored to win that election, but and then you can spin it to, hey, look, Joe Biden was the first guy to unseat an incumbent president since 1992. And in the midterms, everyone was predicting the red wave. That didn't happen. So Biden, I think, has this narrative that he's the underdog and he's going to, maybe Mr. Comeback, Mr. Comeback, he's going to come back and, win in 2024 again. But I think really, I think he has something to prove because right now, just based on his actions, I think the way he feels is that his allies, and he actually talked about how he thinks that the Obama people are really behind a lot of the effort to change the nominee. I think that he thinks that his allies and people in his party are kind of turning their backs on him because of his age. I think he sees this as not the 2024 election as an opportunity to prove them wrong. And I think the only way he drops out is if his family tells him to. But unless that happens, I think he's going to stay, and I think he sees himself as the underdog who's going to win in November, despite what everyone else thinks.
Got it. So let me play that back. Is what you're saying that there's number one, he has this underdog chip on his shoulder. I'm going to prove you wrong. I'm always underestimated kind of approach to life, which I find, endearing. But what I'm also hearing is that you think that he thinks he has a good shot of winning, or do you think he knows that he's as big of an underdog as, let's say, you think he is?
Okay, so that's actually an interesting question because I'm not fully sure what he thinks. I think so. Obviously, he has access to the internal polls, and I've seen on Twitter reports of Democratic governors and even members of the White House staff who see these internal polls and are
Mm-hmm.
think it's really bad. I'm sure you've seen those too. Democratic internal polls have Democrats or have Biden specifically tanking in every major swing state.
Mm-hmm.
So he obviously seeing that data, but I don't think that he'd be this adamant about running if he thought he had no chance. So I think it's somewhere in the middle. I mean, if I had to take a stab at it, I'd probably say he knows he's down in the polls right now, but I think he also thinks he's being underestimated and that the polls are wrong. So he sees the data, but I think that he does think that, the American people, like they did in 2020, are going to come home to him for whatever reason.
Yeah, I noticed he said that in the press conference as well. that, hey, both in the Stephanopoulos interview, he was like, hey, my people are telling me this is a toss-up. And then in the press conference with NATO, he was like, lots of presidents have been further behind and won. And so I think you're right. I think he's holding on to, I would argue, circumstantial evidence that should give him confidence, but he's interpreting it as like, hey, there's enough here. I'm not crazy. And you all have been underestimating me. And he's probably still a little pissed that Obama discouraged him from running in 2016. Yeah. That he felt like, maybe Hillary was Obama's favorite. So I hear you there. I guess, do we think he understands how bad he looked in that debate? Like, I kind of feel like he doesn't realize how devastating that night was for him.
That's what I think too. And in the Stephanopoulos interview, George asks him, he's like, hey, so have you like rewatched that debate since then? He's like he's not sure. He's like, I mean, I think I have. Like, do you remember when he says, like, I think I have, I'm not sure. Like, I think that alone is a pretty big red flag, not only just for him, but like either like there's two scenarios. Either he has watched it and he's not sure, which I think is just a bad sign for him because he doesn't remember, he doesn't understand the gravity of it, or he hasn't watched it, which is a bigger problem because that means his team hasn't like sat him through this and been like, do you understand why this made you look like you can't run the country? And like even if Biden had a good performance, it's always just throughout the history of presidential elections, I feel like it's always a good idea to watch how you look in debate because there's always room to improve. Like in 2000, one of my favorite political stories is that Al Gore's team had him watch the SNL skit of his debate because they wanted him to understand why he came off as, I think the word they used was an egghead because he said lockbox a million times. So I think that's a problem on its own. I mean, I want to kind of pose that question to you because I don't really know the answer either.
One thing that I learned from my brief time working on the advance team for the Phillips, New Hampshire campaign is there is an interesting dynamic between the principal and the team. And that was, we were supporting a congressman who is not nearly as influential as a sitting president. And I think you would hope that the two key advisors would in safe spaces kind of speak truth to power kind of thing. But I don't know if that happened. Like, I don't know if Jill and whoever else Joe trusts, quietly said, hey, we really effed up. Like, this is a major, major, major screw up. And I don't know if we're going to be able to recover from that. I don't know if that conversation ever happened. And I think part of the problem is that these advisors, their incentives are a little bit perverse in that, if he drops out, they're out of a job. It's not like Whitmer is going to pick them or Harris is going to take them. That Harris and Whitmer, they have their own teams. Like all the inner circle around Biden's, kind of on the bench. So from the interview, it didn't seem like he realized how big of a deal it was, or he was really putting on a brave face saying, oh, I had a bad night, like whatever, it's 90 minutes. And obviously I think all of us were like, well, the polls showed that people were concerned about his age for the last couple of years. And this debate was supposed to assuage those concerns, and it really did the opposite.
That if I could just add on one more thing, because I think like that debate, I thought that Biden was going to come out the winner. I didn't think that he was going to have a great night. I didn't think he was going to look like Barack Obama up there, but I thought that he would do just enough to be like, okay, so he's like okay, and then at like 15 minutes into the debate, I was like, oh my God, Dean Phillips was right. So it's kind of like, I really thought that prior to that debate, Biden was going to do enough to kind of, like you said, assuage the concerns. And even that low bar, he didn't meet. So, like you said, that really was the worst case scenario. And if Biden, if they haven't communicated that to Biden, or if Biden doesn't, have that in his mind, then I think that's a really fundamental problem with both his team and the campaign, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I too, I've been a skeptic of Biden for a long time. I myself was surprised how bad he did in that debate, because I thought, well, they've negotiated this deal. Their team basically got everything they wanted. They were going to mute Trump. They're going to remove the live audience. It was going to be pretty much at a time and place of Biden's choosing. He would have a whole week at Camp David to prepare. Like, I thought it was like, okay, yeah, Rocky Balboa, like he's getting ready for this thing, and he'll do like the State of the Union thing. He'll pull it out, when it's critical. And it turns out that obviously that didn't happen. And all the excuses around, like, well, he had a cold, or, he had traveled 15 time zones 2 weeks beforehand.
It was like 12 days before. Yeah.
Yeah. Or like, he, it was very late at night and blah, blah, blah. It just seemed sad. And we got a live comment here from Jay Perrin, also a channel member. Thanks for supporting the channel, Jay. Jay's position is changing horses this late seems incredibly risky, considering the Republican candidate, how close this still is. I think Biden still has the best chance. Democrats just need to unite and work harder. What's your take on it? Like, it is mid-July. Do you think it's too late?
I don't think it's too late. And I'm not sure how popular that's going to make me in the stream, because I'm not sure what the breakdown of your viewers is, whether they're still on the Biden train or if they want to go with Harris or Whitmer or who else. I think it's not too late. And if I were, if I had supreme control of the Democratic Party, which obviously I don't, I would think that Kamala Harris is the better choice. Now, I think that she has more, like, what that commenter said, I think is like 50% right, in the sense that, like, let's say we drop Biden tomorrow. Let's say we put, we go to the backup QB, we put Harris in. I think there's a lot of ways that could go terribly. And I think that, especially doing it before the RNC, that convention is going to be, really, especially Democrats twitch right before. They're going to be like, these guys can't even make up their mind who their nominee is. So I think in a lot of ways it could go bad. And I think I could totally see like a scenario on, kind of playing out where it is horrible. But I think when you look at the state of the race, there's just more upside with the Harris nominee or a nomination. And I think that right now, I don't think Biden has that good of a chance of winning, like I said, unless things really changes before November, which it probably won't. So I think roll the dice, go with Harris, because there's just more upside there. And again, if you're a Democrat and you believe that Trump's a threat to democracy, if you believe the things that, they're saying about Trump and how dangerous a president he is, you got to do something, because, right now they're losing. And I know it's close, but even in the national polling average, Biden is down, I think, 1 or 2% nationally right now. Mm-hmm. And in 2020, he won by 4.5. So that's a 6.5 point swing away from him. That's nowhere. That's not even close to winning. Like, that would be a pretty, significant electoral college loss. So I think if I represent the Democratic Party, I'm rolling the dice, and I think I'm going with Harris.
Yeah, you bring up my favorite thing. You referenced data. This is 2020.
I thought that would play well. I thought that would play well. Nerds for Humanity live stream.
Look at this. It's like another world. Look, Biden ahead of Trump. Now, obviously, this is 2020, to be clear. And now we're going to go to 2024. And it's a different picture. And the only thing that changed is that Trump was convicted of felonies, found liable for sexual assault, and tried to overturn an election. And he's still doing better versus Biden than he did before all of that, which only tells me, my conclusion is that means Biden's got his own issues that are weighing him down. And I guess one question I'd have for you, Ryan, is if we play this out and we say, we're going to ride with Biden, What is the scenario where Biden turns this around? Like, is he going to suddenly energize the base because the base will realize something new about Trump that they didn't know before? Like, I kind of feel like everything bad about Trump, we all know. What's going to change?
Yeah, that's like kind of what I was thinking. And so during the primary in January, I think I'm wrong about this, and you especially are gonna, be happy I'm admitting this. But I think during the primary, I thought Biden was the better candidate than Dean Phillips in terms of electability. I think post debate, I've been proven wrong about that. So kudos to you. You were 6 months ahead of us. But I think the reason that I thought Biden was going to be able to pull it out, because even in January, his numbers were still bad. He wasn't popular he was still less popular than Trump in terms of approval rating. But I thought that once Trump came back into the spotlight, American voters can be reminded of why they don't like him, because he's never been popular.
Yeah, yeah.
The thing is, he's back in the spotlight. He debated Biden for 90 minutes on national TV, and 50 million people watched it. And he's still ahead of Biden, because obviously not only did Biden do worse, but the average voter saw that, and in the polls, I think 2/3 of American voters said Trump won the debate. They saw that and they said Trump looked more presidential. He looked more in command of the material, and he came off better than Biden. So I think, if Biden turned it around, I don't think there's a single thing that can happen. I think the scenario where Biden wins is he wins like the Rust Belt, he wins Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, probably loses Georgia, Nevada, and Arizona, and maybe he wins Arizona. I'm a big believer in Biden can still win Arizona, but I just think that there's no silver bullet, right? Like I'm kind of rambling here, and I wonder if you have any thoughts, but there's no one thing that I think can change that would make Biden take the lead again, because Trump's been convicted of 34. Everything has happened to Trump, and he's still winning.
Yeah,
I just don't think there's a single thing.
I've heard it described this way, that Trump won in 2016 because they made the campaign about all of Hillary's flaws, and Biden won in 2020 because they made the campaign all about Trump's flaws. And now in 2024, we're only talking about Joe Biden, because even though Trump is a train wreck, like Biden's, and even he's like a Chernobyl meltdown. And so nobody is talking about the train wreck, because they're like, well, but how can anyone criticize Trump's readiness to be president when the top of our ticket, is really struggling to, get Putin and Zelensky mixed up, or, forgetting who his vice president, that his vice president is Harris and not Vice President Trump. He's just making all these crazy unforced errors. So to answer your question, I think the only thing that could help Biden if he stayed at the top of the ticket would be, number one, he needs to do a lot more events and have those events have almost no fumbles. And it's going to sound unfair, but he kind of needs to nail it now, because he's got all of these terrible games on his record, that he needs to throw some perfect games now. Then maybe people would be like, oh, wow, that was a crazy time, but now he looks amazing. I mean, I have seen no evidence of that from the Stephanopoulos interview or the NATO press conference. I know the radio interview he did after the debate, those were questions that his campaign picked for him. The call in to Morning Joe, you could literally hear him turning the pages that they printed out for him to read. So I don't think we're going to suddenly see Joe Biden turn into Barack Obama in terms of his oration. So the other scenario, good for Biden, would be if maybe something new, something really terrible came out about Trump, maybe some Russia connection or something with the Saudis or something. But I kind of feel like the guy's almost like Teflon now. People are numb to it. And they'll just say it was rigged.
Yeah, that's what I think too, because I don't really think that say something did come out about I'll take your example connected to Russia. I don't really think that that would have even as much salience as the 34 felonies conviction, because the Russia thing has been a thing since people have been accusing Donald Trump of being or Biden calls the term Biden uses Putin's lapdog. So
Mm-hmm.
they've been accusing Trump of being you know closer to Russia since 2016. So I don't I think in theory that would probably change something, but at the same time, I don't really, I just can't imagine that coming out and it changing enough to restructure the race. That's why I think you said it's Teflon Don. I don't think anything would change it on its own.
Yeah, like if another one of his extramarital affairs came out, I don't think people would be surprised or care, right?
No,
No.
it, even in that department, that would be like in the debate, Biden asked him about it and he kind of just brushed it off. So,
Yeah. So I think number one on the whole, like Dean Phillips thing, the beauty of Dean Phillips was that he was a generic Midwestern center left Democrat who was under the retirement age and had all the policies everybody agrees with, but just didn't have the baggage of Biden, which is why I liked him. And I think in hindsight, the biggest tragedy is less that Dean Phillips lost his primary campaign, but that there were no other primary challengers from elected office. And I don't blame Whitmer and Shapiro or Pritzker, because it would have been career suicide for them a little bit if they challenged the sitting president. But it does speak to the weird incentives of the current system. Like basically, we are now fielding a clearly, perhaps, unrecoverably flawed candidate in an election where the opponent is potentially an existential threat to democracy. And yet we haven't changed them yet. And it's July 12th, and it's been over a week now since we saw what should have been a disqualifying performance. And here we are. But now let's for giggles, Ryan, let's just say Biden does drop out. You've mentioned, well, then you go to the backup quarterback. Let me challenge you on that one.
Okay.
This backup quarterback actually has played in the NFL before and literally ran for president and had a very big announcement event. I think like thousands of people were there and raised a lot of money and didn't even make it to Iowa. So why do we think she would do better against Trump than Biden would? Is it mainly that we would bet on the anger with Trump and she's not Trump?
Okay, so first of all, just have to make the Geno Smith comparison there because you left the door wide open. Maybe failed QB on the Jets, but he comes to Seattle, great organization there, and maybe she makes the Pro Bowl. But I mean, we're both Seahawks fans. I had to do that, but I think okay. So the logic of that is right, but I think that the one problem is that Kamala Harris, I think, has changed over the course of the past 5 years. So I followed the 2020 Democratic primary was like the first major presidential primary that I really followed. Mm-hmm. So obviously I watched all of those candidates, and I thought I remember Harris had a really good first debate, but she kind of fizzled out after that. I think that Harris has her moments. I thought her problem in 2020 is that there's not really a lane for her, right? Like the moderate and electability people, they were behind some sort of combination of Biden, Buttigieg. The left wing of the party, Sanders and Warren. Michael Bloomberg kind of came in late. He didn't really do as well as people thought. Andrew Yang, obviously, the smart people voted for him. I'm just joking. But, and Andrew Yang even had a bit of a lane there too, but obviously there's reasons he didn't end up staying in the race as long as Biden or Sanders. Mm-hmm. So I think Harris didn't really have a lane. She was she wasn't, the moderate electoral choice, but she also wasn't really a progressive Democrat the same way Warren or Sanders was. So I would say, the reason that she dropped out before Iowa was because she realized there wasn't a lane for her.
Mm.
And to me, that doesn't mean that, like, obviously, yes, she did not become president, so I guess in that way it was a failure. But I don't really think that it was as big of a failure as people make it out to be. So she hasn't run nationally. She hasn't run against a Republican at the presidential level. And I think that in some ways, there's a lot to like about her. She's a good orator. I think she's a good speaker. I think she's energetic. I think, Kamala Harris is awkward, right? Like, the joke is that you see the videos of her saying, you think you just fell out of a coconut tree, like you hear all that stuff. But I think she's funny. I think that she could come off as endearing. So I think she has her strengths. And I think that, her 2020, loss to me isn't maybe as much of a failure as I think the consensus would indicate. So that's why I think there's reason to believe in her. It's a risk, but I think it's a risk you might have to take at this point if you're a Democrat.
Interesting. Okay, so your argument is the fact that she had this big campaign, sort of launch event. She was a sitting U.S. senator. Kamala Harris for the people, like cool tagline, and then dropped out before Iowa. What I'm hearing you say is I actually, in a way, like she exercised good judgment. She saw the data, saw there wasn't a path to win, and just kind of made a rational decision.
Yeah.
I guess
Tulsi Gabbard stayed in until like March, so
yeah.
Made worse decisions.
Yeah. I guess my counterpoint to that would be, if you are of a caliber that you can win a general election, you should have been able to make it and come in like in the top 3 in Iowa or top 5 in Iowa. And the fact that she was polling even beneath that, I think in some polls behind Andrew Yang, says to me like, wow, that's not like Geno Smith going from the Jets to the Seahawks. That's like as if Geno Smith like couldn't even win a NCAA game, and then we're just going to put him on the Seahawks. Like, maybe that's a little unfair to her, but like she didn't. I mean, I think she was polling in like low single digits, right?
Oh, yeah, but by the time she dropped out, she had no path, and she collapsed in polling. She peaked in July of 2019, I think, and then by the fall of that year, she was, not close to the top 5.
Okay, so your argument is you'd still, if you had all power, and Biden said to you, "Hey Ryan, I'm going to drop out," would you say, and if your objective is to have the Democratic Party retain the White House, your best bet is to go with Kamala?
Okay. So this is the question that I was really hoping you wouldn't ask me, because I think it's so complicated. I could talk about this for like 20 minutes, but because no one wants to hear that, I'm going to shorten it down to this.
Okay.
I think if you're going only off of electability, just who can beat Trump, I do think that I see the appeal for Gretchen Whitmer. And I think that's what a lot of people think, right? Like, run someone like Gretchen Whitmer, maybe even a Josh Shapiro, right? And they would smoke Trump because they're, in every way, they're from the Midwest. They're, governors who won big in 2022, right? Like, they have the full resume. I think Kamala Harris, compared to them, she might not beat Trump, but I think compared to them is a little underrated. Just my like brief take on how she stacks up against someone like Whitmer, who's, I think would be the third person in line behind her and Biden. I think that she's worse than Whitmer in terms of electability, but I think the gap is smaller than people think, solely because I think that if like say the Democrats ran Whitmer and the thing played out where Biden drops out, right? Like if Whitmer's the nominee, is Harris still the vice president? Like that just to me feels like you're skipping over like, the first woman Black vice president in the history of this country. And I just don't think, with a progressive Democratic base, and especially with, aside from that, Democratic Party, absolutely needs Black voters to win over states, like important states like Georgia and potentially North Carolina. I don't think that plays well with not only with Black voters, but also I wonder just with the party as a whole. And so I could see a scenario where Whitmer gets the nomination and she beats Trump decisively. I could also see there being unexpected anger if they went with Whitmer that they skipped over Kamala Harris, who would in theory be second in line. I don't know. I think Whitmer's riskier than people think. That's the main point I'm trying to get across.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard those arguments, and I understand them, and I think they might, they may not be wrong. A couple of things. One is we do have data on Harris approval rating, which is not great. She actually has almost as low approval rating as Biden. So she has a 49.5 disapprove and a 37.5 approval. Part of it is her. She's not, I think a lot of people would say she's not like the most warm, authentic candidate. Maybe that's fair, maybe that's not, but that's what people think. The second thing is that she would have to defend the Biden record, and whether it's fair or not, people blame the current administration for high prices, insecure border, like international, like instability. And so she would also have to answer the question of, hey, you were VP, you saw the president's capabilities diminishing. Obviously, it got to a point where he had to drop out. So then you were part of the cover up. Like, I feel like Harris would have a lot going against her. Who knows what skeletons are in Whitmer's closet? But I know that she's from Michigan, and Michigan's an important state. I would think a Whitmer Harris ticket is not a demotion for Harris. She would remain VP and has lots of options later on. She's still young. What's your take on like my argument that, hey, Harris is going to have to own some of the weaknesses of the Biden record? And I know about IRA and CHIPS Act and holding NATO together, but a lot of swing voters don't care about that stuff.
Yeah. Well, I think you're 100% right in that Harris would have a lot of explaining to do, certainly more so than Whitmer. But I also think, right, like just thinking about this campaign, let's say it's October and Gretchen Whitmer's debating Trump.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost 100% sure that Trump would ask her, would say some form of, look, Sleepy Joe stepped down and you're the Democratic nominee, right? Like, if you endorsed Biden in 2020 and up until July 2024, whenever you endorsed him to run against me, right? Like, Gretchen Whitmer, I think would still be associated with Joe Biden. Maybe not as closely as Kamala Harris, but I think closely enough that she would still, if she was the nominee, end up explaining, end up having to explain, why she also endorsed Biden, why she engaged in, what people are calling like the cover up, I guess. So I think you're right in the sense that Harris would, have a lot of pressure on her, but I think that Whitmer would have like 80% of that anyways. And then one more thing I do want to cite was earlier today, I just pulled it up here. NPR, PBS, Marist, they did a national poll.
Mm-hmm.
It was pretty good for Biden, but they had Harris doing a point better than Whitmer nationwide. Whitmer's tied 49-49 with Trump. Harris is up by 1. She's at 50-49. So in the limited polling we do have, it's kind of a wash, which I think kind of makes me more confident that the gap between Harris and Whitmer is smaller than people think.
Okay, so I'm so glad you brought that up, because I personally think it's a little bit unfair to Whitmer and Shapiro to compare their poll numbers versus Trump when a lot of the country has never heard of them or hasn't learned about them. They haven't had an opportunity to tell their story. Everybody knows who Harris is. She's had plenty of earned coverage over the years, earned media coverage. Whereas like Whitmer, like we have a chance at the convention to have an amazing 2-3 minute bio video, all these people saying great things about her telling, the country about how she fixed the damn roads and just gets stuff done. And she's from the Midwest. And like, I don't know. The fact that Whitmer is even polling close to a sitting president and a sitting vice president without ever even campaigning, I could argue she's got a lot of ceiling, a lot of headroom to grow. Maybe one could say, well, but as people get to know her more, they're not going to like her. Like, what is there not to like about Whitmer? Maybe she overreacted a little bit with COVID, but you know, we didn't know what we know now. You know, people might point to the fact that like they tried to kidnap her, but I don't think that's against her. If anything, that might
No, definitely not.
Right. So like, the fact that she's polling so close to Harris already, to me, is a feather in Whitmer's cap. Like, if you polled Dean Phillips against Trump, he would probably not do as well as Harris would be. And the fact that Whitmer is really impressive, because Whitmer is not like Newsom. She hasn't been running around talking herself up.
That's true.
By the way, we didn't talk about Newsom. You are a former California resident. I am still one. I'll let you go first. Like, what is your take on Newsom?
As a governor or as a presidential candidate?
Latter.
Okay. I get the hype that Newsom gets, because he's one of, like, I think especially from the Democratic perspective of, look, we're tired of, being quieter than Donald Trump. Like, I get why people like him, because he's pretty critical of Republicans, and he's famous because, he challenges them. He debated Ron DeSantis, I think 2 years ago on Fox News, or on some, I'm not sure if it was Fox, but it was, on TV.
It was Fox. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. But so yeah, like you said, he talks himself up. He has exposure. He's the governor of the biggest and most democratic state in the country. Like, naturally, the position I think he's in, and also, just the way he acts, I think it's obvious he wants to run for president in 2028 or at some point in the future. I think he'd be a decent candidate. I don't think, if I'm a Democrat voting on electability, I'd have to imagine that if we have an open primary in 2028, let's say Biden runs, whether he wins or loses, he's term limited, or he, loses. If there's an open primary, I think there's gonna be someone better than Newsom, because I think that Whitmer would potentially run as well. And I even think Kamala Harris would potentially be a better candidate than Gavin Newsom, because obviously like you said, you're right, Kamala Harris is a 38% approval rating nationwide. I think that Gavin Newsom, who's more progressive, than Kamala Harris, governor of Big Blue California. I'm not sure how that would play in Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania or even Georgia.
Yeah. I feel like both Newsom and Harris, coincidentally, who are both from California, unfortunately, they both have the same challenge. Like, they don't come across authentic for different reasons. I think Newsom is almost too smooth, and Harris seems like she's trying to compensate, or she's trying to put on, like, I feel like she's acting sometimes.
I feel like she's just kind of awkward in general.
Or maybe that could be. But those are not terrific characteristics for a winning presidential candidate. I guess maybe Dukakis was kind of awkward, but that didn't work out super well for him.
It did not.
Yeah. So either way, we'll wrap up with this, Ryan, and then I do want to ask about your channel so that people can learn more about it. But let me ask you this exit question. We're on a live stream. This will be on the internet forever. If you had to make predictions come November, who is on the ballot and who wins by how much?
I still think it's Trump versus Biden. I think I'm confident. Like, I'm not 100% sure, but I still think it's going to be Biden, because I think, like I said at the beginning of the video or the stream, I think unless his family tells him to step out or to step down, he's not going to, because he views himself as the underdog. And I think he's going to lose. And I think that he will likely, the map is probably, like, if you're asking about how much, I'll just briefly say, I think the map is he wins the Hillary 2016 states except for Nevada. And then I think he'll probably win, I'm not sure which one it'll be, but I think he wins one of Arizona or Michigan, just to briefly get into the data in Arizona and Michigan, I think it's more likely than not he wins one of them because Arizona, Maricopa County, is growing. In 2020, it was 61% of the state's population. It voted for Biden by 2%. It grows a little bit every year. I think it's going to be probably 63% this year. And it voted for Democrats in midterm elections by a lot. I think he might win Arizona just because of the growth of the Phoenix metro area. Then Michigan, I think he still has a good chance at, just because their Republican Party there is, they almost went bankrupt in 2023, and Republicans haven't won a statewide race in Michigan since 2016. So I think he wins one of those two states, but even if he wins both of them, he's not at 270 in the electoral college. So I think he loses maybe by a bit less than people think, but he's still the underdog. Do you have any bold predictions on that? Or is it too early?
No, it's never too early. It's never too early to make predictions. So I'm going to say the people on the ballot in November will be Trump versus Harris. This is a prediction. This is not what I want. This is a prediction. I would have preferred if it were Whitmer, but it'll be Harris. I think that'll be the least drama. And she will win by probably one of the closest elections ever. Neither of them will win the popular vote because of a surprising turnout for third-party candidates. But Harris will prevail, and maybe Whitmer will be her VP. I don't know. Actually, if I'm Whitmer, I may not want to be Harris's VP. I might plan for Harris to lose and then run myself in 28.
That's what that Whitmer would do.
Yeah.
I think Kamala Harris, if she's the nominee, just briefly, I think she'd choose either Roy Cooper or Josh Shapiro. That's what I think.
Shapiro, yeah, he's young. He's got time.
He's a great speaker.
He is a great speaker. He gives her ticket. He might outshine her a little bit.
That's true.
But maybe that doesn't matter because she's like, whatever, I'll be the president. Yeah, I think, if you're Shapiro's advisor, maybe you take it because you're like, look, you're a hot governor now. That may not be true 4 years from now or 8 years from now. Let's get the promotion to VP, and you're young. And then, the worst case scenario is that Harris is a disaster and you'll have to explain that away. But if Harris just does an okay job, then you run in 2032.
And if you're the VP, then you have national exposure, which you wouldn't get as governor of Pennsylvania.
Yeah. And then if Harris loses in 24, is that too much of a taint on Shapiro? Maybe not, because he's like, hey, it was a last minute thing. I was asked and I served the country, Yeah. Huh.
I see
Harris Shapiro. That could be I would take that over Biden Harris.
I think that ticket would have they could lose, but I think that they do, especially in Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
I think they do really well in the Midwest. I think that ticket would win Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania. That's what I think.
We should do that. Ryan. Okay. So tell us a little bit about your channel and how people can get more of your analysis and insights.
Thank you. So my channel is called Understand Politics. It's right below my name on the stream. It has it. But if you go to YouTube, look up Understand Politics. It's the first result. I do kind of similar to what Nerds for Humanity does. I look at a lot of data. I look at the nuts and bolts of this race. I have a video that's coming out tomorrow morning talking about the Ohio Senate race. So I do a lot of the specific stuff, but also a lot of big picture stuff. Thank you. And my recent videos, those are not my recent videos. If you click on videos, you'll see thank you. If you click on videos, you'll see my recent videos. But I predict the election. I talk about the polls. I talk about the same stuff we talked about tonight. So hopefully, if you like what Nerds for Humanity does, if you like the stream, I think you'll get a kick out of my channel. We do a lot of data over there as well. So I'd appreciate if you saw this, if you check me out. That would greatly help me out. And
yeah, I love it. And just so you know, Ryan, I'm signed into one of my work YouTube accounts, which is why I was not subscribed to your channel. But on my Nerds YouTube account, I'm already subscribed to you. So
awesome. Yeah.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, man, and we'll have to have you back to catch up on, maybe probably the next thing is maybe I guess after, right before the Democratic convention, probably would be pretty interesting combo, because that'll be after Republican convention, and then we'll by then know if Biden's going to for sure stay or not.
I would love to have that conversation. I had a lot of fun doing this, so anytime you invite me back on, I will make it work. I'd be happy to. Thank you so much.
Ryan. It's been great having you. Good luck on the East Coast. Stay cool. And everybody check out Understand Politics channel on YouTube. Take care, Ryan.
Thank you so much. You as well.
All right. Ryan J., that kid, backstory, is a classmate of my oldest son. So Ryan is definitely from a different generation. But every class has those precocious political nerds, and Ryan's definitely one of them. And I mean that in only the best ways possible. I'm going to give you some closing thoughts on things to look out for in the next week or two. Before I do that, though, I do want to thank the people who make this content possible, and those are the YouTube channel members. Let me sign in to the correct account. There it is. If you're watching this on YouTube, or you're like, hey, I like Nerds for Humanity, I want to keep that channel going, just click the join button and you can start supporting our streaming software costs, podcast hosting fees. By the way, if you listen to podcasts, audio podcasts, just subscribe to Nerds for Humanity. Some people have actually given me a 5-star review on the Apple Podcasts and on Spotify. So thank you to whoever did that. And if others can do it, like, muchos gracias. All right, so let's look at the biggest supporter of all, Soldier One. Soldier One is a senior vice president supporting this channel for over 4 years now. Thank you, Soldier One. Next level down is our vice presidents, Kristen, Slevin, Bike, and Emily Quinn. Thank you to our executive officers. Then we have our hardcore nerds, Gene, David, DK, Jackalego, Mr. History, Mona, Vaughn, Yang, Dean, Galessa, Jay Parent, Dana, Jason, Daniel, Jeremy, Mickey, Joda, Jackson, Unkiu. And then for $1.99 a month, you too can become a verified nerd, support nerdy content. And I'm going to scroll through our verified nerds. They're all amazing, beautiful people who love America and love data and democracy. Okay, so let me give you some closing thoughts on what to look out for. Number one, word is that this weekend might be a big weekend for the Biden campaign, and that rumor has it that Pelosi, Schumer, Jeffries, and Obama are going to try and yes, thank you for reminding me, Lou. This is the one time I remembered, but I appreciate you reminding me as well. So they're all going to try and talk Biden down, and I think Pelosi puts it best when she's like, this is something that Joe Biden needs to decide. Joe Biden needs to make this decision. He's going to do what's best for the country, and then they tell her, well, he's already decided he's in it till the end. And then she says, Joe really needs to be the one to make this decision because we're running out of time. I think it's pretty clear what Pelosi wants him to do. Obama encouraging Biden to step aside could bring some PTSD from when Biden was kind of angling for the nomination in 2016, and Obama thought that Hillary would be a stronger candidate. So who knows if that pressure will work. The biggest thing that you can do is call your congressman, call your senator, and let them know that you think the Democratic Party should pick a new nominee, because if we can kind of flood the phones, then the Congress can say to Jeffries and Schumer, hey, our constituents are livid, and this is not a 90-minute thing. It is not blowing over. People are still pissed about this, and we got to make a change. So that's something that all of us can do constructively. I left 3 voicemails, one for my congressman and one for each of my senators. I don't know if it'll help, but I got to do everything I can. I spent a month in the freezing winter of New Hampshire this January trying to beg Democrats to see the limitations in a Biden nomination. And for the most part, we were told that we were not being truthful about Biden, that we should just ride with Biden, that we're trying to help Trump. And we tried our best to tell them that Biden is going to collapse and it's going to end really badly. I think we've been proven right. And I give credit to the 30,000 people in New Hampshire in that Democratic primary who did not vote for Biden, and 20,000 of whom voted for Congressman Dean Phillips, who started his campaign pretty much in December. So that's awesome. But let's keep trying. So what I'm also doing is I am tracking the elected Democrats who have publicly called for Biden to step aside. And I'm calling that my pass the bag. And basically, I'm donating money to them, because why should I spend money on a losing POTUS ticket when I can at least try and influence the swing districts and see if we can help center-left people win in their congressional districts or the Senate. So these folks in purple are Representative Craig, Cheryl, Schulten, and Glusenkamp Perez are all elected Democrats who've come out asking for Biden to step down and are in competitive districts. The other people in this picture also have asked for Biden to step down and are elected Democrats. They're not outlined in purple because they're in safe districts. So probably don't need to donate to Representative Moulton, although he's been very brave to kind of speak truth to power, because he's probably going to get, he's safe. Whereas Craig, Cheryl, Schulten, and Perez are really in tough races. So yeah, if you can follow all of these people on Twitter, donate to them, volunteer, whatever you can do. These are the people that at least had the courage to kind of say the quiet part out loud, even though they're getting a lot of flack from some Democratic activists who are saying that they're not loyal or whatever. But I think if you really love democracy and you really don't want Trump to win, it's pretty clear that Biden's not going to get us there. So with that, I'm going to say bye, nerds. And last thing I'll ask of you is, can you do me a solid? Can you like this stream or video if you're watching on replay? And also share. Other than that, last thing is, if you go to my Substack, it's basically, if you don't know what a Substack is, it's kind of like an email newsletter. And if you check that out, basically almost all of my streams, a day or two after, I publish the Substack, which then summarizes the key takeaways and gives quotes from the actual live stream. And then, of course, there's a link to the original stream. So that's free. Hopefully some of you find it useful, because the theory is like not everybody has time to sit through these 1 hour streams. All right. Well, thanks. Oh, William, I think you gave a like. I appreciate that. All right, folks. See you next time and have a great weekend. Bye, nerds.